All right. We are back with yet another back-to-back episode of the Two Player Podcast. This time we're going to talk about everybody's favorite show about incest and dragons, Game of Thrones. I'm Eric Kane.
I'm Paul Tassi.
And we're gonna talk about Daenerys, the villain who is trying to take over the peaceful lands of Westeros. This is a theory everyone shares, is that Daenerys is the bad guy, and she is needlessly invading a people that should be able to self-govern without some dragon lady, right?
In theory, like logistically, that makes sense, but I'm just never going to be like, yes, Daenerys must die.
Well, I agree. She shouldn't die, but you have, I know you've talked about the show has a villain problem. And right now I feel like partly that's because someone like Cersei is just so underpowered compared to Daenerys. And I feel like she needs to be nerfed.
Daenerys needs to be nerfed.
Yeah.
Well, the Cersei thing, at least they're addressing that on the show. I thought that was a really good scene this week where Jaime was like, who are our allies exactly? Because, everybody hates us and you killed all of our other friends. I thought that was a really good scene kind of addressing the reality of the situation. I think the problem with Cersei is that, at least for me personally, like I'm still kind of rooting for Cersei after like how badass she was last season. So I don't you used to kind of really hate Cersei, but she became kind of the latest Lannister that you actually like, at least in my opinion. Maybe not as much as Daenerys, but I mean, the Sept scene was just flawless. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't. How can you not give her props for that? So
that's
I don't
some
know.
Godfather stuff right there. I mean,
exactly. So I don't really want her to be deposed or killed by Arya or Daenerys. I mean, that'll probably happen, but I'm not like actively pulling for that. Where it's like, yes, Joffrey must die, Ramsay must die, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And also I think that Cersei just in general in the show has been a lot less awful than Cersei in the books and more sympathetic. I don't know, like Cersei in the books just is so black and white awful the whole time, but I feel like they really emphasized even right from the very beginning kind of like, well, she's in an abusive relationship. Robert is a drunk and a womanizer and he beats her. And I don't know. I've always had a lot more sympathy for Cersei in the show.
Yeah, I mean, the book also hasn't gotten to her kind of grand moment yet, which is like her ultimate revenge on everyone. So she's still kind of stuck in. Well, I guess she's starting to be shamed by the sparrows and all that in the books, but
yeah,
I mean, she was in a pretty prime. She was like the incompetent villain for a very long time, where she was like vicious but just not as smart as all the other villains. But now she is. So she's changed a lot.
Yeah, like Tywin was like the really smart bad guy, and you could respect him, but Cersei was just the big fuck up. And yeah, I agree. And but still, like, and then as you said, that leaves us with a villain problem, though. I mean, it's great to have complicated bad guys.
Euron's the new new hotness.
I
hot
like
topic,
him.
Like pirate.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He's like he's a swashbuckler. He's kind of funny. Like, he's not really a bad guy though necessarily.
I don't mind his character. It's just I don't really take him seriously. Like I think he's gonna come back and cut someone's like head off and like put it at her feet. Like I don't know who that's gonna be exactly, but probably somebody we like. So then maybe we'll hate him more. But I mean, right now he's just I don't know. He just seems like he's kind of filling a role and he's not all that interesting.
Yeah. Do you think? Do you think that Dragonbinder will be part of this, or do you think they're just leaving that out?
I was for a half second I thought that might be like the quote unquote gift he was talking about, but it seems like they're going to leave. They've kind of left the whole mysticism angle of his character out, where he traveled to these ancient lands and got this magic power of this and that. And like I feel like if that was going to happen, they would have introduced that by now.
Yeah.
And to just kind of pull that out of nowhere with like 10 episodes to go would be pretty like, oh, by the way, we have this magic thing that can control dragons and whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't imagine that's going to actually come up, but we'll see.
It makes you wonder though, this changes, like if that's not in it and, and various other changes from the books, like, God, how different are these books going to be if they're ever completed?
I think they're going to be pretty different when all is said and done. I mean, the broad strokes might be there. Like, I mean, some stuff you can't change, like, oh, John's parents or whatever. But and maybe like who's on the throne at the end. But they've been changing a substantial amount at this point to the point where it's no longer kind of even a butterfly effect. It's just like taking kind of an axe to everything. So
Yeah, it's interesting.
not that I think it's like going poorly or anything. It's just at this point it almost has to be dramatically different.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of, in a way, it's kind of exciting. Like, I really, I guess I don't really look forward to the books anymore because I've sort of made peace with the idea that they may never get finished. I don't know about you, but I've sort of given up all hope because it's just taken so long. And like, why have hope anymore? I know hope is what you build rebellions with, because that's what Jyn Erso told me. But I don't want to have to be let down so much. I mean, it's been an ordeal. I mean, I think back and I started reading those books in 2000, I think it was 2001. I mean, it's been freaking 17 years.
Yeah,
and we still don't even have the 6th book out yet.
I think we're like, we'll get the 6th book probably in the next year or two, but the 7th book it'll be closer to a decade from now, is my guess at this pace.
Yeah, and we can't get Brandon Sanderson to finish it because he's too PG-13, and these are R-rated books.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, I don't know. I also kind of feel weird that there's only 12 episodes left for the entire show. Does that feel weird? It feels like maybe I'm just selfish and I want all the traffic from full like 19 more episodes or something.
It is kind of weird to just have this firm end date on it, because now it's good and bad, because a show like The Walking Dead, you're like, oh my god, like where is this going? Like we're going for 20 seasons? Is this seriously happening? Like at that point when it's that open-ended and like this could run forever, it's almost a detriment. Whereas this, it's kind of nice to know we're coming to like this grand conclusion that everything's been building towards, but on the other hand, it's like it's can be kind of uncomfortable, because then every scene you don't like, you're like, oh, that was a waste of time. We only have like 12 hours left. Like, what are we doing watching Sam emptying chamber pots for 5 minutes? Like, this is...
I liked that scene. No one else did, but I did. I laughed.
It was fine. It was just too long.
Yeah, no, I agree. It went on for a while.
But,
and also, like you're saying, like, this goes back to season 6 to some degree, which I don't know about you, but I felt like a lot of it was rushed. Like, things were happening so quickly throughout, and maybe even season 5, I'd have to think back, but it just seemed like a lot of things happened really quickly, and like plot points were resolved almost jarringly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the earlier seasons maybe took their time a little more, and later seasons have been focused more on these kind of big epic events and devoting time to them as much as possible, which I can understand that desire, but I don't know. So that's why, like, this week I didn't really mind kind of a slower episode where, I mean, hardly anyone died except all the Freys, and it's just a lot of conversations. And I don't mind the show taking its time when it can, and I usually do not view that as wasted time. I think that's a good use of the show's time, depending on the scene. Like even the infamous Ed Sheeran scene. That was fundamentally a really good scene. I really liked that scene in terms of what it was kind of meant to accomplish with, Arya realizing that the Lannisters aren't this like massive evil randos. It's like actual people. So I think scenes like that are important. And
I didn't even know who he was, so I was
good.
blissfully unaware of how bad that whole thing was with him. I'm like, do I know that guy?
I felt he like deleted his Twitter after that. Like it wasn't even his fault. It was like he did a fine job. I don't think he did a poor job in his cameo. It was just putting him, like, the decision to put him that front and center when he's like so well known by so many people who aren't you.
Yes,
was jarring.
See, I mean, I'm old.
I only know him because of my wife, but they've done other musical cameos before, but they're all like, oh, it's X random member of Mastodon or Snow Patrol or whatever, like playing a musical instrument in the background or something. And it's not people you would just be like, oh my God, it's Taylor Swift. Like you would immediately recognize.
I'm sort of hoping that for the remaining 12 episodes, they have a new musical like superstar every single time.
I can see them like racing to edit out like 4 more musical cameos they had planned, or like a 3-episode arc where like Ed Sheeran goes on a quest by himself. Like
he starts traveling with Arya, and they go down to King's Landing together. And
at that point, I'd be fine with that. I'd just be like, all right, fine, he's in the cast now. Just go with
and
it.
it becomes a musical, like
Yeah.
that one episode of The Flash, which was the best episode.
But it wasn't
of The Flash,
even. It wasn't even about that. It was like a musical cameo, and it was him. Like if, like, say, like Ben Affleck showed up,
Yeah,
in
that'd be
Game of
weird.
Thrones. It's just the fact that he just felt so out of place, and he wasn't like dressed up enough to be different. I don't know. It wasn't just him specific. It was just the whole concept of like special guests X.
Yeah, it doesn't fit in this particular story. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I'm not hip to the times because I just thought that scene was glorious. I really loved it.
Yeah, it's
I
a
really
great
loved
scene.
the whole. I just thought it was a really overall a very impressive season premiere, and it definitely. I'd been really. I mean, it'd been a while since Game of Thrones has been on, so I think I also was just really kind of missing the show because it's really it's a really good show, like. And it's been, since it was pushed back to July, it's been over a year since we've been able to watch it. So,
Yeah.
of course, we've gotten good stuff like Westworld in the meantime, which has been nice. But in terms of where it goes from here, you have any predictions?
I think we're about to get into a pretty rush pace here with this
Yeah.
little time left, and I think there's going to be a lot of bodies hitting the floor.
And fast travel. Lots of fast travel.
Fast travel, yeah, teleporting all over the place.
Littlefinger can teleport. That's his secret power, and it explains
I missed
everything.
I missed that whole thing about how he teleported. I didn't catch that. I guess it was too sneaky for me, but
Honestly, he's not the only one. I mean, there's lots of characters who seem to just sort of appear like.
I remember
months
Varys doing that. I think
Yeah, Varys
where
does
he like
that.
teleported across the whole ocean. But I don't know. I guess that's kind of his thing. But oh man, I don't know. It's hard to see how the kind of Daenerys alliance is broken at this point because just everyone hates the Lannisters so much. Like outside of her, like her herself just being assassinated, like I don't even know kind of what can even stand in her way. Like even with just like the Unsullied and the dragon, she probably could have taken a good chunk of the kingdom. But with all this other stuff, like I don't see how the Horse Lords will turn away from her now since she killed all their leaders. Like it is very tough to see what would bring her down at this point, which is almost kind of a weird position to be in because usually with this kind of dramatic arc, you want the hero is supposed to be like this perilous predicament and how are they going to get out of this? But it's like it's the opposite. It's how is she going to lose?
Yeah, and this is one reason why I hate the Daenerys storyline in both the books and the show. Okay. I hate to say this. I'm going to say it though.
Don't say it.
I'm going to say it.
Please don't.
Okay, I'm not going to say
Okay.
it. But if I were to say it, I would say that Daenerys is just always winning too much. All she does is win, 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 no matter what.
I mean, I'll give you over the last like 2 seasons, but I think you have to keep in mind just how much she was losing for such a long time, where she was just literally kind of like a sex slave. And that didn't last super long, but she was wandering in the desert and like all her people were dying and they thought they were going to like starve to death. So I think she's kind of been through her trials and tribulations. And like, even when she had one kind of ruling in Marine or wherever, that was like a disaster. So I don't know.
Yeah, she's not a very good leader, but she wins anyways.
Right. But then Tyrion shows up and he's going to make her a good leader. So
yeah. I
disagree that she's won as much as you think. I agree that she's in a very strong position now to the point of kind of absurdity, but
yeah,
I think she's lost her fair share of conflicts.
Well, I mean, but she's struggled. I'll give her that. She has struggled, but at every point, she's overcome that, and it's kind of always a little bit magical, like she's got dragons, so when the dragons get kidnapped, she just tells the dragons to sick the guy that kidnapped her and they burn him to death. In Marine, she had the struggle against those fucking, what are they called, the
mask guys,
the Sons of the Harpy.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this, the Sons of the Harpy are Mary Sue's. Because sorry, I had to Sons of the Harpy were way overpowered. I'm sorry, they were killing Unsullied like Unsullied were like 4-year-olds. It was ridiculous.
Well, and they killed Barris and Selmy. That was one of the worst moments of the show. Period.
Yeah,
Them killing Barris and Selmy out of nowhere. Like even the actor was like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, well, it was stupid. I hated that. That was dumb.
Yeah.
And really, so this just all leads me to say I really don't like the Daenerys storyline. I feel like it was good when she was on sort of a spirit quest.
Well, when she didn't have
but
the dragons just swoop in and say, well, I don't know. One of my fundamental problems with Game of Thrones storytelling is when the magic starts to get too strong, it kind of takes away all the kind of human dramatic weight before it. Like when you start resurrecting like four different characters, and when your
Mhm.
main villain is now this just giant ice zombie who doesn't have a personality, he's just a monster. And
Yeah.
your ally has command of three powerful dragons that could literally not be killed by I don't think anything at this point. It's in the show has been the show and the books have been based around kind of a lack of magic for so long that once you start introducing magic, it just kind of breaks everything.
Well, and I wouldn't say just magic, but like the best part of Game of Thrones as a fantasy has been its subtle magic. You know, it's mysterious magic. I think it's great when there is Beric Dondarrion who's getting resurrected by Thoros, but he's the only one getting resurrected. Once
Right.
you introduce, you know, several others, well, then it becomes like commonplace. I think it's great that there's the others, the White Walkers, and that they're this mysterious threat. But it becomes a little silly when you start introducing dragons and the White Walkers, and the whole conflict becomes epic high fantasy rather than that sort of subtle low
yeah.
magic fantasy.
It's
that
just how would
defined
you
it
get
for so
around that?
long.
Because it's obviously been building to that kind of since
Mhm.
since they first had the egg, and showed the whites in the first scene of the show. I mean, you knew it had to get to this point at some point. It's just when it's finally here, it's not quite as cool as you wanted it to be.
Well, it didn't have to. I mean, so then there's those theories with like Bran, right, with the time travel and stuff.
Oh yeah, I actually love those theories. But
I do too.
I don't know if I believe them, but
I feel like there's another route that I don't think that they're going to happen either. But like, I mean, there's another sort of way that this story could have gone that could have avoided some of the corners we find ourselves in with these powerful epic fantasy creatures and stuff. Because a really interesting story is how Bran screws everything up and how human people have to deal with the consequences of that, rather than sort of epic showdown between dragons and White Walkers and whatnot. Because I don't know, and I think maybe Martin has backed himself into a corner in regards to this story, because the magic of the story was the politics. The magic was the interactions of real people and the interactions of these houses and betrayals, and now it's leading to this sort of huge showdown between evil forces in the and it's just it's become sort of a lot more boilerplate in terms of fantasy.
It gets a lot more generic, and the most interesting plot development I can imagine at this point is like some epic trail of manipulation where like Littlefinger ends up on the Iron Throne somehow. Like that would be like through using no magic or no fighting. Like that would be something that I would find really cool. Whereas like, oh, okay, Daenerys rolls in and scorches King's Landing with dragons and then wins. Like it's or the Cersei thing. Like that was the perfect example of like that had nothing to do with magic or high fantasy really at all. That was just like brutal calculation and like great characterization and the kind of perfect resolution of a long building plot line. Whereas the other kind of more fantasy driven ones, it's harder to see like, okay, Jon Snow kills the Night King with the flaming sword. Like, is that what we're going for? Is that really going to be that need of a resolution? I don't know. So that's what's sort of starting to bother me, even though I'm still obviously enjoying the show.
Yeah, it's tricky. I don't envy the writers or Martin the position that they're in. I mean, maybe we'll all be surprised, but it definitely feels like so much of the really interesting stuff has been resolved already. Like you think so one of the most pivotal scenes in the entire story is the Red Wedding, right? Because it's such a betrayal and it's so horrific, and you just want you want revenge on the people who did it. Well, we've gotten revenge on the people who did it. They're all dead. I mean, Cersei wasn't even a part of that. Tywin's dead. Roose Bolton is dead. Walder Frey is dead. It's done. it's good. We got our revenge. Now what? You know, like,
Yeah,
so a lot
that-
of these things.
It weirdly felt like kind of a letdown, and like maybe that's some like deep moral lesson of like, oh, even revenge will make you feel empty. But
Yeah.
like as cool as Arya's plan was, like it wasn't really like a stand up and cheer moment for me. It was just
Yeah.
like, oh yes, she's an assassin and she did very good job. It just that whole resolution like felt weird. Like it felt almost too kind of neat and wrapped in a bow for me.
Well, here's the
But-
other. I think that we've got a problem with her being overpowered. Also, like Arya as the sort of
mask thing
scrappy.
is-
Yeah,
yeah.
it's. I mean, it's. I
not
get
just
it.
her, the whole organization of just like, oh, anyone is anyone. Like,
Uh-huh.
great. I always hated that. Where like, even if you had like an android show where like androids were replacing people, and like, oh, so and so is secretly a Cylon, and like
yeah,
it-
totally.
using that trope gets a little old. So like, is anyone
It
really
does.
dead, or was someone wearing a mask when they were killed? And I
Mm.
I don't like that. That's another fantasy thing I'm not a fan of.
Well, it's because it's overused,
Yeah.
and here we see it being overused again. And what's the problem with these things? The dragons, the masks, all this stuff is that they take a character and they remove something vital about them, and that's their struggle. And they give them this huge power instead, and that makes them less interesting. Like, if you think about the time, like when Arya was on the run from King's Landing, trying to avoid like the mountain, you know, first meeting Jaqen Hagar and all that stuff, that was when she was a really interesting character. And you think about Tyrion, when Tyrion was trying to save King's Landing, but then getting double crossed by Cersei and shit on by Tywin and all that. That's when Tyrion was a really interesting character. And a lot of these characters have become less interesting because they've lost a lot of their struggle that made them interesting. And it's weird to have that happen with so much time left in the story, you know?
Yeah, now it
Like
just
you were
seems like,
saying.
well, you're gonna do all the big battles now, and it's
Yeah. And I like the big battles,
Yeah.
but, you know,
yeah.
it's
It is
it's
a weird
we-
feeling.
it's a weird feeling. It's like the denouement is going on before the final conclusion, and I don't know. I guess we'll see. You know, maybe we'll be surprised. I mean, certainly we've been surprised. I was surprised by how ruthless Cersei was at the Great Sept. I thought that was.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know she was going to kill everybody. Did you guess she was going to kill everybody
Nah.
before that episode?
No, certainly not.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
maybe in like the
it
final
was-
moments, I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
But-
Oh yeah. By the time the final moments were happening, it was like, oh shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're all
and
gonna
that's a
die.
good kind of moment. Like that's why the Red Wedding worked too, was because it's just it was like this slow dawning of like, oh my god. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll still get some more moments like that. But again, it's not that many villains to pull these kind of things off that we care about. So
Yeah. So basically,
Guess we'll
stop
see.
watching Game of Thrones. It sucks now. I'm just
no,
kidding.
no.
It's
Game of
still
Thrones is
really
good.
good.
We
It's
just
really good.
we just like nitpicking, but I mean, I'm still like dying to watch it every week. So it's
I know.
it's
I
doing
can't wait
something
for the
right.
next.
But
you know,
and all that
like-
aside, we love it with all of our hearts.
Yes,
Yeah.
we totally love it, but we're worried about it. You
Yeah.
know, you can be worried.
Well, at this point,
Ah.
it's over like in X episode, so nothing. It's not like it's worried about getting renewed or whatever.
Right.
Like
Totally.
it ever was, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and I'm gonna miss it. At least we have 5 or 6 or 7 spin-offs coming. You
oh,
know.
yeah, God, we can do a whole separate episode on that.
All right. Well, yeah, this was fun.
Yeah.
I think we've solved all of life's mysteries and conundrums today. So, thank you to everybody for listening. Not really watching because this is an audio podcast.
No more
now.
video.
No more video. We see the times and how unpopular video has become, so
Yep.
we're moving to an audio format. All right. Peace.
Later.